I'm going to tell you something that took me 2 years and $87,000 to learn. The house I bought for $500,000 was a trap, not because it was a bad house. The house was beautiful. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a pool, updated kitchen, everything you could want. It was a trap because nobody told me the truth about where it was built. My real estate agent knew. The title company knew. The seller definitely knew. And I found out the hard way. I'm going to walk you through every single thing they hid from me, every cost they didn't mention, every risk they glossed over. Because if you're looking at a home in Florida, and especially if it's near the coast, near a river, or in a low-lying area, you need to hear this before you sign anything. This story starts in the spring of 2022. My wife and I had been renting in Tampa for 3 years. We were done renting. We wanted stability. We wanted equity. We wanted a home. We had $120,000 saved, good credit, stable jobs. We were ready. A friend of mine told me about a house in a suburb about 40 minutes east of Tampa. He said it was a great deal, priced below market because the seller was relocating for work and needed to move fast. $497,000 for a house that comps were showing at $540,000. That's a $43,000 discount. We went to see it on a Saturday. It was gorgeous. The neighborhood was quiet. The schools were good. The backyard had mature trees, and the pool was in perfect condition. I asked my agent one question, just one. I said, "Is this in a flood zone?" He looked at his phone, said, "It's in Zone X. That's the lowest risk. You don't even need flood insurance. Zone X, minimal flood risk. No flood insurance required." I felt relieved. We moved forward, put in an offer, got it under contract in 2 days. 3 weeks later, we closed, handed over $120,000 in down payment and closing costs, moved our entire life into this house. 11 months later, I learned why it was really discounted. September 2023, Hurricane Idalia. Now, Idalia hit the Big Bend area of Florida, not Tampa directly, but the outer bands still brought significant rain to our area. Not catastrophic, not life-threatening, just enough rain to flood our neighborhood. I woke up at 4 inches the morning to my wife shaking me. She was panicking. Water was coming through the front door. Not a lot at first. A thin line, like someone left a faucet running under the door. By 6 a.m., we had 8 inches of water across our entire ground floor. 8 inches doesn't sound like much, but 8 inches of water destroys everything it touches. The baseboards, the drywall, the flooring, the insulation under the floor. If you have anything stored in a closet on the ground level, it's gone. Electronics, clothes, paperwork, anything. We lost about $15,000 in personal belongings that first time. And here's what really messed with my head. This wasn't a once-in-a-lifetime event. My neighbors told me this happens almost every year. They said the neighborhood floods with heavy rain, not just hurricanes, tropical storms, sometimes just regular storms during the wet season. I'd been living there for 11 months, and nobody said a word. The first call I made was to my insurance company. I thought we were covered. We had homeowners insurance, good policy. We were paying $4,200 a year for it. I filed the claim, explained the flooding, sent them photos. 2 days later, they called me back. Flood damage isn't covered under homeowners insurance. That's right. Homeowners insurance covers wind damage, fire, hail, fallen trees. It does not cover flooding. Flooding is a completely separate insurance policy through a completely separate program, the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, and we didn't have it because our agent told us we didn't need it. I called him. He said, "Well, your house is in Zone X. FEMA doesn't require flood insurance for Zone X properties. I told you that." He did tell me that. He was right that FEMA doesn't require it for Zone X. What he didn't tell me was that Zone X doesn't mean won't flood. It means lower risk based on a map that was last updated in 2019. The map was wrong. The map didn't account for the way water moves through that specific neighborhood. It didn't account for the drainage problems. It didn't account for the fact that every house on my street has flooded multiple times. He knew this. I found out later that he'd sold 3 other houses in that same neighborhood. He knew it flooded, and he never mentioned it. So we're out $15,000 in damages with no insurance coverage. Let me tell you what happened next. I went to FEMA, filed for disaster assistance. They sent an inspector out. Inspector walked through the house, took notes, took photos, left. 2 weeks later, we got a letter. FEMA determined that because our house is in Zone X, the flooding was not consistent with the designated flood risk level, and our claim was denied. Translation: the map says you shouldn't have flooded, so we're not helping you. I appealed, spent weeks gathering documentation, talked to my congressman's office, got a new inspector sent out, second denial, same reasoning. We were on our own. I started doing research, real research. Not the kind you do when you're shopping for a house and everything looks exciting, the kind you do when you've already made the mistake and you're trying to understand exactly how badly you got burned. Here's what I found. About 40% of flood claims in the United States come from properties that are not in a designated high-risk flood zone. That's not a fringe number. That's nearly half of all flood damage happening in areas where the government says flooding is unlikely. The FEMA flood maps are updated infrequently. In many areas, the maps haven't been revised in 10 or 15 years. Climate change, urban development, changes in drainage systems, all of these things alter how water moves through an area. But the maps don't reflect that. And here's the thing that really made me angry. Real estate agents are not required to disclose flood history in Florida unless the property is in a designated high-risk flood zone. Zone X, no disclosure requirement. So the seller can know the house floods every year, the agent can know, the neighbors can know, and as long as the FEMA map says Zone X, nobody has to tell you. I wasn't unlucky. I was set up. After the first flood, I knew I needed flood insurance. Better late than never, right? Wrong. Sort of. I applied for NFIP flood insurance. Got a quote back. $6,800 a year. $6,800. On top of the $4,200 I was already paying for homeowners insurance. That's $11,000 a year in insurance on a $500,000 house. That's 2.2% of the home's value every single year just for insurance. For comparison, when we were renting, we paid $2,400 a year for renter's insurance that covered everything. Going from $2,400 to $11,000 destroyed our monthly budget. We had planned our finances around the $4,200 homeowners policy. Adding $6,800 on top of that meant we were hemorrhaging money every month. And it gets worse. I called around to private flood insurance companies to see if I could get a better rate. Most of them wouldn't even quote me. They looked at the address, saw the flood history, and said no. 2 companies did quote me. One wanted $9,200 a year. The other wanted $11,400. So NFIP was actually the cheapest option, and it was destroying us financially. Let me tell you about the second flood. October 2023, 5 weeks after the first one. Tropical storm. Not even a hurricane. Just a tropical storm that stalled over our area and dumped rain for 36 hours straight. This time, it was worse. We got 14 inches of water in the house, up to the electrical outlets. We had to evacuate. Stayed at a hotel for 2 weeks while remediation crews ripped out the floors, the walls, the insulation. Everything had to go because of mold risk. Total damage, $42,000. Insurance paid $28,000 after deductible. We paid the rest out of pocket. But here's what the insurance company didn't cover at all: the cost to rebuild. They paid for the damage. They paid to tear out the ruined materials. But the cost to actually put the house back together was on us to manage. Finding contractors in post-storm Florida is a nightmare. Everyone's backed up. Everyone's overcharging. We waited 6 weeks just to get someone to start. And the rebuilding cost us $31,000 on top of what insurance paid. Running total out of pocket after 2 floods, $47,000. Now I want to talk about something nobody discusses when they talk about flood zone properties, the resale nightmare. After the second flood, we started seriously considering selling. We needed out. The financial bleeding wasn't stopping, and I couldn't stomach the thought of another storm season. So I listed the house, asked $485,000. That's $15,000 less than what we paid, not even accounting for the $50,000 we put into it over 2 years. First offer came in after 3 weeks, $390,000. I almost laughed. Almost. The buyer's agent was upfront with us. She said her client had done research, found the flood history through public records, factored in the insurance costs, and $390,000 was what the house was actually worth to someone who knew the full picture. That offer was $110,000 less than what we paid. And after factoring in our improvements and the money we'd already lost to flooding, selling at $390,000 would have meant we were out over $160,000 total. We didn't take it. We dropped the price to $440,000, got one more offer, $415,000. We took it, closed in January 2024. Total loss when you add up everything: the purchase price, the improvements, the flood damages, the insurance costs, the remediation, the hotel stays, minus what we got back at sale, $87,000. We lost $87,000 in 20 months on a house that was supposed to be a safe investment. I want to be clear about something. I'm not blaming the hurricane. I'm not blaming the rain. Nature does what nature does. I'm blaming the system that allowed me to buy a house in a flood-prone area without ever being told it was flood-prone. I'm blaming the real estate agent who sold 3 houses in that neighborhood and never once warned a buyer about the flooding. I'm blaming the FEMA system that labels areas as low risk when they clearly aren't, and then denies claims when those areas flood. I'm blaming the state of Florida for not requiring flood history disclosure on all properties, regardless of zone. Every single person involved in my purchase had access to information I didn't, and none of them volunteered it. So, what should you do if you're looking at a house in Florida right now? First, ignore the flood zone. FEMA zones are outdated and unreliable. Zone X properties flood all the time. Don't let anyone convince you that Zone X means safe. Second, talk to the neighbors. Knock on doors. Ask them directly. Does this street flood? How often? How bad? Neighbors will tell you the truth because they're tired of watching new buyers get blindsided. Third, look up the flood history yourself. County property records, local news archives, Google Earth historical imagery. If the area flooded in 2017, 2018, 2019, it's going to flood again. Fourth, get flood insurance no matter what anyone tells you, even if your lender doesn't require it, even if your agent says you don't need it. If you're in Florida and within 30 miles of the coast or a major river, get it, period. Fifth, factor insurance into your budget before you even look at houses. In Florida, insurance isn't a minor expense, it's a major one. If you can't afford the house plus $10,000 or $12,000 a year in insurance, you can't afford the house. Sixth, hire your own inspector, not the seller's inspector, your own, and specifically ask them to assess flood risk, drainage, and the history of the property. Pay for a flood elevation certificate. It costs $300 to $500. It tells you exactly where your house sits relative to flood risk. And seventh, if something feels too good to be true on the price, ask why. A $43,000 discount in a hot market doesn't happen by accident. There's a reason. Find out what it is before you sign. I wish someone had told me this stuff before I bought that house. I wish my agent had been honest. I wish FEMA's maps were accurate. I wish the system worked the way it's supposed to, but it doesn't. And until Florida changes its disclosure laws, until FEMA updates its maps, until real estate agents are held accountable for what they don't say, people are going to keep getting burned. I got burned for $87,000. Someone else reading this might lose more or less. but the trap is the same. Zone X doesn't mean safe. Flood insurance is not optional, and the people selling you the house are not on your side. They're on their side. Make sure you're on yours. Comment below. Have you bought a home in Florida and discovered flood problems after closing? What happened? I want to hear your story because I know I'm not the only one this happened to. See you in the next one.